The new Supergirl movie dropped in theaters this past weekend. So today I am going to stop and rank all 8 live-action Supergirl projects from worst to best. I meant to get this video out Sunday, but I had technical difficulties, so it's coming out 2 days later than I intended. It also will probably look a little bit different than all of my other videos because I've had to switch editing softwares as well. But I hope you guys still enjoy the video. Anyway, let's get into the ranking. Easily in last place is Supergirl 1984. This is a movie that just does not work on any level whatsoever. The entire setup for the movie is that Argo, the place where Supergirl lives, loses an orb that powers the entire place. And time is very much of the essence. They say they have about 3 days to live without the orb. If they don't get the orb back in 3 days, they will all die. So, when she goes to Earth, she should rush and, try to quickly get the orb and get back and save everyone she loves. But instead of doing that, she decides to go on like 50 different side quests that have nothing to do with the main plot whatsoever. Like when she arrives on Earth, she decides to apparently buy a wig, and then also she uses that wig to disguise herself and go to school for 2 days, and also decides to get a boyfriend while she's there. So she wastes 2 of her 3 days doing that. And then on the 3rd day, after she gets sent to the Phantom Zone by some random witch lady that is for some reason the villain in the movie, she finally remembers that she's supposed to get the orb to save everyone she cares about. On the 3rd day, when she only had 3 days. So then she finally gets out of the Phantom Zone and then has a very, very badly CGI'd battle with the witch lady. And I know it was the 80s, but they could have done better. I've seen many 80s movies with far better visual effects than this Supergirl movie had. It was bad even for the 80s. And then also, when she's leaving her home and coming to Earth, she just randomly gets a Supergirl suit somewhere in the middle of the journey, because she leaves Argo without a Supergirl suit at all. And then when she shows up on Earth, she suddenly has it. And then, the witch lady is, for some reason, the villain of the movie. I don't know why they chose to just make up some random witch as the villain. I know Supergirl doesn't have, a lot of villains. It doesn't have, a super expansive rogues gallery. But, they could have found someone if they actually cared enough to try. But they just really didn't. And, pretty much the only good thing in this movie is the suit. But I still think it's one of the weakest Supergirl suits that we've ever gotten. Because the spandex just isn't super great for a live-action costume, and a lot of the modern ones have found a way to make the suit look super comic accurate without having it have to be spandex. They found a material that works really well. It looks good on screen and also looks like it's ripped straight out of the comics. So this movie suit is decent, but it's still probably one of the weakest Supergirl suits we've ever gotten. And I mean, really, I just don't think any of the actors really do particularly anything all that great. They were given a terrible, terrible script, and none of them do anything whatsoever to make the script even slightly bearable. None of them do anything whatsoever to help out this script. Both Millie Alcock and Melissa Benoist were also given a lot of crappy scripts. But their acting was able to make the crappy script somewhat bearable and make it slightly better than crappy. Ellen Slater just does not do that. None of the actors in the movie do that. The movie's just bad all the way around. No one in this movie seems to have been trying at all to make a good movie. Didn't seem like anyone actually cared, or anyone was actually trying. So, I mean, this movie is just clearly the worst Supergirl movie, so it is easily in last place. Next on the list is Supergirl Season 6. This is definitely better than the 1984 movie, but it still has a lot of problems, especially with the writing. And I think that the season doesn't start off too bad. I think the first episode of the season, where they're tying up the loose ends from season 5, is a pretty decent episode. But then from there, it just kind of gets progressively worse as the episodes go along, until the finale is borderline unwatchable at certain points. But I think it really manages to be better overall than the really bad 1984 movie. Really just because the actors are good enough at their jobs and actually care about what they're doing and aren't just there to get a paycheck. So they can take the crappy scripts that they're given and elevate them to be a little bit better than crappy. Like Melissa Benoist does a great job as Supergirl in all 6 seasons of the show. Even when the writing was terrible, she did a great job. And the same thing is true for everyone, for all of the Arrowverse. All of the leading actors, aside from Batwoman, where neither one of them did a particularly great job. All of the leading actors, aside from Batwoman, did great jobs. Even when their shows started to suck and they started to get really crappy scripts, they always did great jobs. They always gave it their all. They did the best they possibly could to make the shows watchable, to make the episodes good, because you could tell that they cared about what they were doing. They enjoyed what they were doing. They were not just there to get a paycheck. They were there to actually do the job and do it as good as they possibly could, because they realized that they're playing a character that a lot of people care about. There's a lot of people that really care about the characters that they're playing, and they want to see the characters done right, and they want to see the actors playing them care about what they're doing, care about the show that they're on, and give it 110%. And Melissa Benoist did that. She always went in and gave it her best and did the best she possibly could, even when it got around to season 6, where the show was just really, really bad and the scripts just absolutely sucked. She always did the best she could, and that's really the only reason why I think it's better than the 84 movie by a decent amount. And also, while the main plot of the season is not great, it's a pretty bad plot. It at least makes somewhat sense as a plot of a Supergirl project, unlike the 84 movie. I think that the suit isn't particularly great, because Supergirl just shouldn't wear pants. Like, she doesn't wear pants. She's not supposed to wear pants. So I don't know why they ever decided to take the absolutely perfect Supergirl suit that they had in the first 4 seasons and suddenly just get rid of it and give her pants in the last 2 seasons of the show. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It is very bad, but it is better than the 84 movie, really just because of Melissa Benoist doing such a good job as the character. Next up is Supergirl Season 1. This is a season where I think it is equally as good as it is bad. I think 10 out of the 20 episodes are actually pretty good, but then there's also still another 10 episodes that are really bad. I think some of the standout episodes are the Flash crossover episode is probably the best one in the entire season. I think that the Toyman episode is a really good episode. And then I think that the Red Kryptonite episode is also pretty good, because it kind of showcases Melissa Benoist's range as an actor, and so that she can do more than one thing. But, I mean, the season is a fairly mediocre season of television, I think, because it's equally as good as it is bad, right? Half of the season's good, half of the season's really bad. Which is why I think it needs to go here, because I think everything above it has slightly more good than it does bad, which makes it a little bit better than, like, just straight, flat-out mediocre. The suit in this season is really, really good. Possibly is the best Supergirl suit we've ever gotten. Because I think they got it right, like, right out of the gate. They got the perfect suit immediately right out of the gate. The material is better than spandex. And, I mean, it looks exactly like the comic book suit. Everything is right. And then, obviously, Melissa Benoist does a great job as Supergirl. And really, where the season starts to falter is really once they kill off Kara's aunt and transition to Non being the main villain. I think making Non the main villain of a season of television, period, was just a really odd choice, because he's never been a main villain at all in the comics. He's always just a henchman type of guy that just works for General Zod. He's never really ever on his own and never really had main villain potential, so choosing to make him the main villain was really weird. And especially pivoting away from Kara's aunt and choosing to do him instead, because she had the personal connection with her aunt and kind of created a bit of an inner struggle with her, because she knows that what her aunt's doing is wrong and that, you know, she needs to stop it because she does care about Earth, but also it's family, you know, it's her aunt is one of the last Kryptonians alive, you know, and the only blood relative she has besides her cousin, who hasn't been introduced in the show yet. So, you know, she is very conflicted of, you know, exactly how she needs to stop her aunt, if she should even stop her aunt in the first place. And it creates a lot of great inner struggle with her. But then once they get rid of her and replace her with Non, all of that just kind of goes away, and she loses all of the inner struggle she had, because she doesn't really care about Non. He's just an evil guy who she needs to stop. So all of the inner conflict just kind of goes away in the season because of that. It's not terrible. It definitely is better than I remember it being. I think most of Supergirl benefits from a rewatch, because every season except for season 6, I think, is better upon rewatch than it was the first time that you watched it. Because, you know, you remember Supergirl being like this really bad show with terrible writing, and like nothing was really very good. But then you go back and you watch it thinking that it's going to be terrible, and it actually surprises you a bit, and you see that it's really not all that bad. It's not as bad as you remember, and it's actually pretty decent. So I think that this season especially benefits from a rewatch, and really makes it better than it probably would be. It's still definitely better than season 6 either way, but it definitely improves a little bit with a rewatch. So that is why this belongs here, right? It's not good, but it's not like great, but it's also not bad. It's fairly mediocre, and I think pretty much everything else above it is better than just mediocre, so it belongs at this spot on the list. Next on the list is Supergirl Season 2. I don't think that the season is wildly better than Season 1. I think it's really just like a slight improvement upon it. I think the villain is slightly better this season. And obviously introduction of Mon-El and Superman into the show really helped it out a bit, and really helped out this season quite a bit. Every episode with Superman in it was a standout, because the Superman actor always does a great job in every episode Supergirl he appears in, and obviously he was, you know, the Superman and Lois. He did a fantastic job there as well. And then Mon-El was a great addition. Him and Kara have great chemistry on the show. which is probably because him and Melissa Benoist started dating in real life while filming this season, so that chemistry was actually real, because they eventually got married and are still currently married. So the chemistry that they had in the season was very much real chemistry, and I think that minimizing Cat Grant's role in this season helped it out quite a bit. I think Cat Grant was like a real thing that kind of dragged down season 1 a little bit, because she was fairly annoying at times. So her not being in this season quite as much helped it out a good bit. And I think casting Linda Carter as the president in this season was a very good idea, because she was, before Supergirl, she was the only really successful female-led superhero thing, right? She was the only one, really, before this, because, before Supergirl, it was Linda Carter's Wonder Woman show, and then the really, really bad Supergirl movie in the 80s. So, Linda Carter was really the only other one, so having her be the president was a very nice touch, and was kind of an homage to what came before, and kind of the thing that sort of led to Supergirl existing as a show. And having the villain have the emotional connection to Monel instead of Kara, I think did work fairly well for the season, because the season focused around Monel quite a bit, so having his mother be the main villain this time, I think did work fairly well for it. It's not a super great improvement over season 1. They're fairly close in quality, but I think that this season is just slightly better, which is why it's on this spot on the list. Next on the list is Supergirl Season 3. I know that most people were probably expecting Season 5 to be here, or maybe even lower on the list, but I think that Season 5 is a bit better than Season 3 for a couple of reasons that I will get into when I get to Season 5's placement. But Season 3 is really good for 2/3 of its run. Then, once it gets to the last third of the season, it's really bad. Rain was a very good villain. They handled her very, very well. And if they had have continued to focus on Rain all the way until the end of the season, this would probably be in like first or second place. But because for the last third they decided to just randomly throw Rain out of the window and kind of forget about her and pivot to the World Killers, it hurts the season as a whole and brings it down quite a few placements on the list, because that decision hurts the season quite a bit, because Rain was a really good villain, and they had the emotional attachment to both Kara and Lena, and you had all of the mystery surrounding exactly who Rain was for the early parts of the season, and then, they were just, Kara and Lena were both trying to save her in different ways and find a way to cure her being Rain. But then they just pivot away from all of that completely and introduce the World Killers out of nowhere, and it really just hurts the season quite a bit. I think that having Jean's father be the guy that voiced Martian Manhunter in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited shows was a very, very nice touch. It was a very smart decision. I enjoyed that greatly. And I don't really remember if John's dad was in any earlier seasons than this. I think he might have been, but I just remember him being in this one. And I think that casting decision was a very smart casting decision. And it's not a bad season at all. But I mean, it's really brought down by that last third, because this is also the first season where Supergirl was officially in one of the crossovers, where she actually got her own episode of the crossover, because she had that mini crossover in season 1, and then in season 2 she was in Invasion, but she didn't actually have her own episode, because her episode of the show was advertised as being an episode of Invasion, but it really wasn't, just an episode of Supergirl. Invasion didn't actually start until Flash the next night. And then obviously the musical episode also happened in Supergirl season 2, but that was an episode of Flash technically, not an episode of Supergirl, and it was also a mini crossover. So this is Supergirl's first really official crossover where she actually gets her own episode and gets to fully participate in the crossover. And I think Earth X was the second best crossover that they did, and it's really only bested by Crisis, so that helps this season quite a bit as well. And if it wasn't for that last third of the season, this would probably be first or second place, but because of that last third, I have to put it here. In third place is Supergirl 2026. This is a movie that is good, but not great. It is definitely a decent film. It's not incredibly bad. It's definitely a decent film. There's nothing overly bad about it. The script is a fairly mediocre script. I definitely think James Gunn should not have approved this script. He definitely needed to tell the writer to go back and write another draft of it, because there are a few problems in the script that I think could have been fixed with another draft, so I don't really know why he approved the script in its current state. And the color palette of the film is really bland and dull, and the best part of the comic book is the visuals. I have not personally read the comic, but I've seen several panels from it, and they are visually stunning. And this movie's just not. It's very, very dull, very bland. Instead of all of these bright, colorful pastels that the comic has, they chose to get rid of all of that and do browns and grays and yellows, and just make a very bland movie visually. And then the CGI is really bad. Half of the movie you can tell that they shot it on a green screen, because the actors just do not blend in with their environment at all. You can tell that they shot it in a studio, standing in front of a green screen, and the background was added in post, because it's just so obvious that they're not actually standing there, because they just do not blend in with the environment at all. And then there's one scene where I think the CGI is really bad, where she's flying in space, and then she shoots some heat vision, and that scene looks like a PS2 cutscene. So the main problem with the movie is really just the visuals, and then the script is fairly mediocre. Jason Momoa and Millie Alcock both do great jobs. They do as good as they can with the script that they were given. They're trying their best to make the movie enjoyable, to make the movie a decent film. Despite them being given a mediocre script, they give pretty good performances. The movie's definitely not the worst superhero movie of all time. It's not even in contention for that spot. All of the people on the internet saying that it's the worst superhero film of all time probably haven't even seen the movie. There's two groups of people calling it the worst superhero movie of all time, and one of those two groups is the Snyder cultist, who would call literally anything not made by Zack Snyder the worst superhero movie of all time, because they worship him like he's a god and think that every movie he made was some masterpiece, and is like the greatest thing they've ever seen. So James Gunn's DCU could release a Dark Knight level film, and they would still call it the worst superhero movie of all time, because that's just how the Snyder cultists are. And then the other group is the people like Dean Cain, who are these fat, ugly losers with small penises who probably live in their mom's basement, who are trashing Millie Alcock for her appearance and trashing the movie, calling it, worst of all time, because they want attention and they have absolutely nothing better to do with their lives. And like, these two groups probably haven't even seen the movie. Right? Don't listen to any of the people calling it the worst of all time. It is far from the worst of all time. From what I've gathered, if you're not just some troll who doesn't have a life and you just wants attention, then you're not going to think it's the worst of all time, the worst movie of all time. If you've read the comic and you read a lot of comics and you're a massive fan of comic books in general and you read a lot of them, you're probably going to go on the lower side of the mid range for the movie. Probably going to give it a 4 or a 5 or something like that. And then if you're someone like me who doesn't really read a lot of comics, hasn't read a lot of comics, but just likes superhero movies and comic book movies and stuff like this, you'll probably be more on the higher end of the mid spectrum, in like a 6 or maybe a 7. But like, it's definitely, you're not going to think it's the worst movie of all time. That's just not true at all whatsoever. I think that the movie is definitely good enough and enjoyable enough to be worth spending the money on a ticket to go to the theater and watch it. It's very in the realm of the first Thor and the first Captain America movie, where they're decent introductions to the character. They have some problems, but they're still relatively enjoyable. And as the universe goes on and they release more and more films, it'll become fairly forgotten about, and most people, and a lot of people, probably won't talk about it all that much. But it's still not a terrible film. And realistically, it's fairly even with Supergirl season 3, but I think this is more consistent as a whole than Supergirl season 3, which is why I put it above it. So the movie is good. It's not great. It's not like the greatest superhero movie of all time, or even really the greatest Supergirl project of all time, but it is also far, far, far from the worst. So that's why it's at this spot on the list. In second place is Supergirl Season 5. This is a season that I think very much benefits from a rewatch, maybe even more so than Season 1 does. Because, like, when I first watched it, and like my memory of first watching it, I remembered it being fairly bad. I remember it being a quite bad season of television. But then upon rewatch and going through and watching the season all the way through again, it's far better than I remember. Like, it's a really good season of television, honestly. I think everything before Crisis with Jean's brother is handled very well. I think they do a lot of great things with that, and have it be sort of John's test for Crisis that the Monitor gives him, similar to the test that he gave Oliver and Barry and Kara. Giving the same test to Jean, I thought was a great idea, and was a nice way to do some Crisis setup on Supergirl, because all three of the main shows did Crisis setup in their pre-Crisis seasons, and then post-Crisis and the Crisis season, post-Crisis, they all kind of handled with the effects of Crisis and everything. And I think that also worked pretty well, because in the background, while they were doing all of the Sean's brother stuff, they also had all of the Leviathan stuff going, and their exploration of how Leviathan changed in the pre-Crisis, from the pre-Crisis to post-Crisis timeline, I thought was handled very well. I think making Lena into a villain this season was a good idea, and they followed up very well on the season 4 cliffhanger. And I think Lex is still very good in this season. He's not quite as good as he was in season 4, but he is still very good as a villain and all of that. And obviously the suit is worse than the 4 seasons prior because they decided to give her a nanotech suit with pants, which was a terrible idea. Supergirl and the Flash never needed nanotech because they have super speed. They can change faster than you can blink. They did not need nanotech suits. I don't know why they decided to give them nanotech in their suits in the Crisis seasons. It just didn't make any sense. And I think also the 100th episode is very good. The recast of Mixie is far better than the original Mixie that they had. And, you know, it has a few problems for sure. I think Andrea Rojas is definitely the biggest problem with the season because she is honestly somehow more annoying than Cat Grant most of the time. And they tried to have this whole, you know, emotional story with her about her father and her working for Leviathan and whatnot, but I don't think it really landed all that well. And then, you know, doing the connection with Lena with her past and having that be sort of one of the reasons why Lena was becoming a villain and all. I don't think it worked very well at all whatsoever. Everything that they did with pre-crisis and post-crisis with Jean and Kara, and then the stuff they did post-crisis with Lex, I thought was very good, and then the brainy stuff I thought was good. It definitely had a couple bad episodes, specifically the one with all of the different brainies that led to him becoming sort of evil in the season. I thought that episode was fairly bad, but I think enough of the other episodes were good to where it's fine and it doesn't really affect the season too much. It's not a perfect season. It definitely has its flaws, but I think it works better as a whole than season 3. But I don't think it's quite as good as season 4, which is why it's in second place. In first place is Supergirl season 4. This is definitely by far the best Supergirl project that we've ever gotten. It works on pretty much every single level. You know, the suit is perfect because she still has the same suit from the first 3 seasons of Supergirl. So, you know, it's still like the perfect Supergirl suit. Like they never really did better than the first 4 seasons of Supergirl when it comes to the suit. And I think both of the villains are really good. Sam Witwer does a fantastic job as Agent Liberty, and John Cryer did a surprisingly great job as Lex Luthor. And Supergirl is a show that was always very political, but I think this season made the political nature of the show work far better than it ever did in any other season, because it takes the political messaging that's typically in all of the seasons and it makes it work really well with the main story, to where it doesn't feel forced like it does in pretty much all of the other seasons. You know, they don't like just shove the political messaging down your throat, because they make it work really well with the story for the season, where like you can tell that it's there, you know what their message is, but it's not so forced down your throat like all of the other seasons. It's subtle enough and masked enough by the main storyline with Lex and Agent Liberty and all of that to make it work pretty well. And, you know, I think the fact that Lex is barely in the season kind of works in the season's favor, and kind of builds Lex up to be this, you know, kind of shadowy figure working in the background, where like they kind of keep hinting that someone's doing something to pull the strings and set everything up, and that, you know, it may be Lex Luthor because of the inclusion of Otis and Mercy, but like they don't fully reveal it until very late on in the season. And I think that works really well, and it kind of gives Brainy a nice role too, because it allows him to kind of work against Lex with like from an intellectual side of things, and sort of have, you know, a chess match with Lex, where Lex is always 2 steps ahead, and Brainy has to try and figure out what exactly Lex is planning, what he's trying to do, so he can help Kara stop it. And, you know, I like, you know, it's the kind of different layers of Lex's plan, where he kind of starts orchestrating it from the very beginning, even before he's even introduced into the show, where, you know, he reveals that the president's secretly an alien and gets the president kicked out of office and replaced by someone that he has control over, which essentially makes him the president of the United States. And then he uses his relationship with the Kasnians to sort of orchestrate a war between the U.S. and Kasnia, so he can come in and, you know, save America from the Kasnian invasion and sort of appear to be a hero to the American people, while also destroying Supergirl's image with the Kasnian clone of her, to kind of have her go and try to attack the president and do a bunch of stuff to make Kara look bad and make it look like she is the bad guy in the situation. And Lex almost manages to win. Like, he almost gets away with everything, and he kind of gets the last laugh at the end, because, you know, even after he dies, you know, because Lena shoots him, he still gets what he wants, and he still wins because he manages to turn Lena into him and turn her into the villain, which gets paid off very nicely in season 5. So I think that this season, you know, just kind of works the best out of all of them. Like, it's not 100% perfect, but it's about as close to perfect as a Supergirl project has gotten. So it is easily in first place. Thank you guys so much for watching. Obviously, if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. It really helps me out. Also, subscribe to my channel. You know, help me grow my channel and all. I'm sure I have other videos on the channel that you'll enjoy. You know, so go check those out. Watch some of those as well. And feel free to share your ranking of the live-action Supergirl projects down below in the comments. If you want to include some of the animated stuff, you can as well. You know, feel free to do that. And obviously, you know, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you all next time.